Gushy, gushy.
Right? We get to talk about the sweet stuff. We talked about the boundaries in the previous episode, so if you're just joining us and you're getting prickly about loving kindness and being walked all over, listen to episode 9 and then come back and join us here for this episode. Or if you just feel like you're ready for some sweetness, hang out with us.
Yeah, you're in the right place.
Place.
It's about to get ooey gooey up in here.
Yeah, I love that.
You too.
Yeah.
I love love.
I love love.
Love and kindness. Okay, I think we should start off by talking about loving kindness, how it relates to DBT.
Sure.
So, can you give us the synopsis of that?
Yes. I was overjoyed when I opened up the second edition of Marsha Linehan's Skills Training Handouts and Worksheets book, because that's when I saw that she had added loving kindness to the mindfulness unit. So loving kindness in DBT terms is mindfulness as a spiritual practice. And I think it's really important because, as lots of my Buddhist friends have told me, it's really important to temper the focus-oriented mindfulness with compassion-oriented mindfulness. That my understanding is that there can be a coldness that kind of develops with being solely focused on, like, being able to put your attention where you want it. I could see where if you get really good at that, you might start feeling just a little bit superior, right? And I don't know, maybe you are, but that can get in the way of heart practice, right? So there's like focus practice and heart practice. And Maddie,
yeah, that's like such a good segue, because you're talking about that, and I'm like, wings of awakening, wings of awakening.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so fabulous.
Yes,
wings of awakening.
Wings of awakening. And so this is also from Buddhism. So I love that, like, I love that Marsha brings this up, because you need both. And so when we talk about the wings of awakening in Buddhism, we talk about insight, or what you're talking about, focus, like that insight, that clear seeing. And then we talk about the heart and having both. Because sometimes, and whenever I do like corporate meditations, it's so funny. I go into corporate spaces and they're like, can you talk about mindfulness for success and all this? And it's all mindfulness and breathing and hacking your emotions and all this other stuff. I'm like, what if instead I talked about love and kindness and compassion? Because the more that you see clearly, the more likely you're going to find things that you don't want to see.
Tell me a little bit more about that first.
So think about this. When you first started doing the work, getting into DBT, getting into, for me, meditation, you start to see your patterns.
Oh, so brutal.
Right? You start to see the things that trip you up. You start to see the greed, the hatred, the delusion, those flames we talked about in previous episodes. You start to see all of this very clearly.
You start seeing the icky stuff about yourself.
Yeah, the icky stuff about yourself, the icky stuff about the world. So what you need is to have something to do with that.
You need to be able to temper it with compassion.
Exactly. And so when we talk about the wings of awakening, it's really easy to think about it as one side or the other. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of heart practice. I'm going to do a little bit of insight practice. But what I try to think about now, and my practice has come to this head, it's a dialectic. And it's come to this because of this podcast that we've done throughout this process.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so throughout this process of learning more about DBT, learning about dialectic, I, in my own sitting practice, have started to examine these wings of awakening less as a one or the other. And like some weeks I'm strengthening my insight, some weeks I'm strengthening my heart, and instead holding both at the same time. They're not necessarily opposing truths or anything, right?
But they're opposing practices.
In some ways, yes. But really what I'm learning is that I can hold insight with compassion, and I can hold compassion with insight. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about the wings of awakening. And you need those, they talk about them as wings because of balance.
I know, I'm thinking about like a one-winged bird.
A Nemo.
Can't fly.
Yeah, a little Nemo fish.
Oh, right.
Yeah, a little candy fin. Yeah, so cute. yeah, you need to have, if you do all heart practice, sometimes it gets hard to see things clearly. And if you do all insight practice, it gets hard to treat the things you see clearly with kindness. And it can be a little cold, can develop into, and what I see more than anything else is folks who kind of shy away from compassion, shy away from loving kindness, or metta, is what we call it in Pali Sanskrit. They tend to be intellectualizing it, really want to intellectualize. And so heart practice gets us into the body. And so we have the mind and the body working together, and the mind and the heart and the body all working together to eventually lead us to this awakening, to this liberation, to this contentment that we're all looking for.
You know what I think we need to do at this point? I think we need to explain what loving kindness practice is.
I think that's a great idea.
So it's not too abstract for people who don't know.
Yeah, if you have no idea what we're talking about, buckle up. Here you go. We'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Do you want to tell them, or do you want me to tell them?
Why don't I tell them what Marcia lists in the book?
Yes.
And then you can elaborate.
I love this.
With all your fabulous wisdom.
Lay it on me.
So basically the crux of the loving kindness practice is it is actually a meditation practice. So you start by, there's some different ways to do it. In the West, we often recommend that you start by thinking of someone that you really love. So we can kind of do it right now.
Sure.
So, all right, everybody, think about someone you love. Like someone you love that, like, when you think of them, your heart kind of swells up. Like you get it's so easy to love them. Like that could be your dog or your cat, could be your grandma, could be your sister, your best friend, if you're lucky, your partner.
I also say you can use a cartoon character if that helps too.
Okay. Okay, I have not heard that.
Yeah, it's kind of helpful for some folks.
Nemo?
Yeah, sure.
Dory. So the idea is that you kind of imagine them here in front of you and you're going to send them good wishes. So the wishes are usually things like, may you be filled with loving kindness. That's 2 words, Loving. Next word, kindness. That may you be filled with loving kindness, like filled with a sense of love, with kindness, with this yummy kind of feeling. May you be at peace. May you be at ease. May you be well. That's some options. There's actually lots of options. Actually, on my website, on the suffering-optional.com, we'll have a whole thing where you can kind of put together your own loving kindness meditation from lots of different phrases. So you send those phrases out to the person, your beloved, and usually you repeat it 3 times. And then you can pick someone neutral, like, I don't know, the cashier at the store that you go to that you don't have a relationship with, but you don't have any strong feelings about them. Send them the practice. And then you pick someone who's a difficult person, someone that causes you difficult, unpleasant feelings. And, you can try picking the worst one, or someone that you have really negative feelings towards, or you can pick someone that's not the worst, but you practice. This is where you're really building the muscle, and this can be hard. You send them loving kindness, send them the good wishes, and then you send it to like all beings everywhere. I imagine, like, I have this image in my head when I do this of like this panoramic National Geographic, like panning the globe and the savannah with the giraffes and the lions and the teeming masses of people in Kathmandu, all that kind of thing. And then you bring that attention to yourself. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be at peace. May I be at ease. May I be safe and well, whatever the phrases are. And that's the practice. And I have found in my life that this is an incredibly powerful practice.
Oh, yeah.
So before I tell my story about that, I would love to hear you elaborate on it.
Yeah, you nailed it. for, you know, and that's my favorite part about Buddhism and about meditation is there is no right or wrong way. So remembering that, trying not to intellectualize it. So, you know, starting with the benefactor, we call the first category the benefactor. The reason we start with that, because if you think of somebody or something, someone, some being that you love, it ignites this joy in the emotional center of the body, right? So
does everyone out there feel that?
You might not, and that's okay too. Some people have a really hard time connecting with the heart, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if you feel like, when I think about my dog, like I have this little like joy that kind of sparks in my heart, and that is the anchor. Really, is what we're connecting to that feeling, and this can be in the actually over the heart. Sometimes it's in the body, or sometimes it's in the gut. Wherever this emotional center of the body is physically, we connect with that. And then the idea is, as we span through the different categories, neutral, difficult, self, all, can we maintain that connection to that heart center? It's really a felt practice. Now, you're like, but Maddie, what if I don't feel anything? Am I doing it wrong? No. So this is where it's probably helpful to talk about wet versus dry practice when you're doing this.
I love this. I'm so glad you're explaining this, because when you taught me this, I was like, oh, I don't have to feel it.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of times we don't. We straight up don't. And then we're like, oh my gosh, I'm broken or something's wrong. And then we get into that second arrow, all this stuff.
Right. That I can't summon compassion at will. I can't feel that loving kindness. So dialectically, you might be able to, and you might not be able to.
Yeah.
You might sometimes yes, sometimes no, different for different people.
Or so sometimes what I have experienced in my own practice is when I do benefactor, easy squeezy. The second it turns into self.
Easy to feel that
easy to
juicy
feel the
heart feeling.
The second I go to self, it's like a wall goes up. It's very difficult for me. And that's why also we talk about, especially when it's difficult, when it's a difficult person or self, starting small. So like you could start with the person who's caused you the most harm, but I would not recommend it just like from a like trauma-informed meditation space. Start with somebody who annoys you. Start with somebody who maybe cut you off in traffic. Start with somebody who is just like not someone you care for. Not somebody who's caused you the most harm in your life.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like a muscle. It's a muscle, we have to train it. So, but wet versus dry practice. When you're in wet practice, that is the like ooey gooey, chewy caramel center of the heart. That is the, oh, I'm in it, I'm in my feels, I'm connected.
That's what I feel when I think about beans.
Yeah, when I think about George, my dog. Right, when we think about our producer Steph,
when
right?
we think about Steph, when I think about you,
right? So
my friend Holly,
that
so many
gooey,
people.
The ooey gooey wet part of that. Now, when we start to, because we're anchoring in these phrases. For me, it's may I be at peace, may I be at ease, may I be kind and gentle with myself, may I be filled with love and kindness. So when you start to do that and you don't feel it, there's still a ton of merit to anchoring in those phrases. So the Buddha said, what one thinks and ponders upon becomes the inclination of the mind.
Okay. I think that's really important.
Should I say it again?
Please say it again.
The Buddha said that what one thinks and ponders upon becomes the inclination of the mind.
So the things that we're thinking about become what our mind does.
Yeah, like automatically kind of goes towards.
I mean, and that makes sense because literally when you like create these synaptic pathways in the brain, right? If you're constantly thinking about your ex, you're just building that muscle. That's the inclination of the mind, is then to think about your ex.
Yeah.
If you start using techniques to stop thinking about him, redirect the mind, then your inclination of the mind becomes the thing that you're redirecting towards.
And so when we're practicing these phrases, even if we aren't feeling it in the heart, we are thinking and pondering upon loving kindness, which is not a bad thing to think and ponder upon, because if we think and ponder upon enough, even if we never feel that ooey gooey thing, each time we do this practice, we are inclining the mind towards loving kindness. So it becomes, I do this practice off the cushion a lot, and I drop the you or I, whatever, and I just walk in peace, ease, kind, gentle. Each footstep, peace, ease, kind, gentle.
Okay, wait, let me just picture this. So you're walking anywhere. And with each footfall, you're like peace, ease, kind, gentle. Peace, ease, kind, gentle. Peace, ease, kind, gentle. Ooh, that sounds like fun homework.
It's solid homework. Yeah, I mean, I started doing it on retreat once, and I have not stopped. So anytime I'm walking anywhere, my mind automatically notes every footstep. Peace, ease, kind, gentle, peace. I don't even try anymore.
Wow.
And what happens is, the more I do that, when I get into traffic and someone cuts me off or someone does something, it's less like, it's actually funny if you're in the car with me ever, I don't go like, you're the boy, what are you doing? You're blah, blah, blah. I go, may you be at ease. Like, I hope you have a good day. Like, which is not quite it, but it's my mind is less inclined to hate. My mind is more inclined to go automatically towards loving kindness, because this is a practice I do every single day, almost all day long.
That sounds quite relieving, actually, because I think that the anger is exhausting, right? Especially when it's anger that's not like, I'm going to be clear, anger is an important emotion. It has a function. Anger is the fuel for change. But sometimes, like when someone's cut you off in traffic, there's not a change to be made. There's not anything that can be done, right? So being able to sort of acknowledge, ooh, don't like how that feels, but also be able to be like, variation. I remember this woman used to always cut me off in the pickup line to pick up my daughter from school. And I just would be like, she's late for her oncologist appointment. And so she needs to be somewhere much more important than I need to be right now. And so I'm just going to extend her some compassion and hope she gets where she needs to be.
Yep.
And there is like a terseness, but at the same time, it's like, it's actually much more relieving than being like, what the hell?
Yeah. Exactly. So that's when we're talking about the practice, that's what we're talking about. And you don't have to do all of the categories at once. You can just do benefactor and self. You can just do benefactor and neutral. The one thing I would recommend is always starting with that benefactor.
Yeah, because it gives you the heart juice.
It gives you, it's a litmus test.
Yeah.
It's a control.
Yeah, it's that feeling. And then what I actually like to do myself is like that, like I had this cat, he was the cutest. He was a little black cat. His name was Y'all.
Cute.
So it'd be like, Y'all, get over here. Well, Y'all would be in so my cats are always in my therapy sessions. It's kind of my brand, I guess. And Y'all would go over to the door and ring the bell to go outside. And so I'd get up, interrupting the session, go to open the door, and then he wouldn't go out. And then I'd close the door and I'd go sit, and he would ring the bell and then just give me this look with his little green eyes and his little black face. He would just give me this look. And when I think of that look, my heart just goes huge. Does that make sense? Like, it's just like, oh. And I was like, for the longest time, that was what I used in order to access that. Because often with humans, my relationships are more complicated. Like, there are so many people that I love so dearly, and it's complicated.
Yeah.
And it feels very important to me to send those wishes and do that loving kindness practice for the people I love, that sometimes I don't like them, sometimes I don't like their behavior, sometimes, they've done things that hurt, but I feel like it very much helps me manage my feelings about it if I'm sending them loving kindness. If I'm coming back to the love part of the story. Yeah. To that, like, that's actually how I feel about them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like that's a good segue into your story.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I will tell my story about loving kindness. Loving kindness as magic. So I have a very painful, difficult relationship with my father growing up.
Same.
Yes. Dads. And I really had no relationship with him for about 10 years. And then he stopped drinking, so that was helpful. But it was a very difficult relationship. And so I learned about loving kindness practice probably around 2012, something like that. So 12 years ago. And I knew who I needed to practice on. So my dad was my difficult person. And really in the beginning, I felt sick to my stomach offering him loving kindness. There was a pettiness in me, and a bitterness, and an anger, and you don't deserve this loving kindness practice, but I'm supposed to do it, so I'm going to do it anyway, And there was, that wise mind part of me felt like there's something that I need to be doing here with this. And so I did, I think it was dry practice and slightly bitter dry practice, chafing dry practice. Because I would be like, well, if you were filled with loving kindness, then you wouldn't be such a jerk. And if you were at peace, you wouldn't be such a jerk. And if you were at ease, you wouldn't be such a jerk. Oh, there's that was my addendum to me.
Yeah, right.
But over the years and years of doing this practice, it changed. And it seemed to just soften my bitterness. This is part of before talking about this, I wanted to be sure in episode 9 that we talk about not getting walked all over, about, having boundaries, all that kind of stuff. Because I think if that's clear, then I hope no one's out there going, well, you shouldn't be getting soft about him. Do you know what I mean? Because I actually feel like it was extremely good for me to become soft. It was really good for me to become softer, to not be holding on to this hard edge of bitterness. And so lo and behold, 2 years ago, I did my loving kindness journey across America. And then I was in the Pacific Northwest where my parents live for 3 months. I spent more time with my dad in those 3 months than I have since I was 18. And he has changed. And so part of me feels like this magical belief that, oh, hang on, I have to sneeze.
Do it. Bless. Get those demons out of you.
I'm like cat fur. I'm allergic,
No, you're not.
Yeah, I am. Mild, not a big allergy, but a mild allergy. But I'm allergic, and there's cat fur all over the mic. Okay. Sorry, Will. And we're back. So I felt like this sort of magical feeling that I'd been casting a spell on my dad, and now he was sweeter. And he always hated my cats growing up, and I was watching him be super sweet to this cat that he and my mom have. So much so that I felt like I didn't recognize him. And so then I was talking to some other wise Buddhist-y friend of mine, and I was like, my loving kindness practice really changed my dad. I don't know what the juju that I was sending out, but he's gotten a lot nicer. Also, he's older and doesn't produce as much testosterone, but still, he's gotten so much nicer. And she was like, is it possible that your loving kindness practice changed you and your perspective on him and your ability to receive him as a whole human? And not just a manifestation of the hurt that he did to you. And I was like, nope, totally not that. No, it's just 100%
your magic.
My magic.
That's it.
My magic wishes changed him. But ever since then, and this is mindfulness to me, is I am now mindful of how differently I'm receiving him.
Interesting.
Like, knowing that, I was like, oh, okay, maybe the magic worked both ways, because I still feel like there was a little magic going on.
Yeah.
But maybe it worked both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am different when because he still will get irritable, whatever, and my reaction to that is no longer like a big trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge relief. Like, that is a huge, huge place to be for me, to be able to step into compassion. And I feel the same thing, like, with a couple of people in my life who've betrayed me, who've like done things that were really very painful, but I love them. And I'm trying to walk that line of being boundaried and, you know, setting limits. But when they do something that particularly hurts, it's very helpful to me to do loving kindness practice for them. And remember that somewhere inside of them, outside of their behaviors and whatever hurts and pains they're responding to, there is a human inside of there that I love very much. Don't like their behavior, but I do love them.
And I think it's also interesting to, like, two things, because first, the Metta Sutta, where we get this practice from, talks about, says it's this line: even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart one should cherish all living beings. And so even if it is somebody who you don't love, you don't feel deep down underneath everything, having the capacity to be like, I love you just because you're a being,
just because
and I cherish you just because you are. And to me, that's relieving, because it's like, oh, I'm enough. Oh, if they're enough, I'm enough. Isn't that nice?
Wait. Okay, let's just backtrack a second. Say the thing with the mom and the thing again.
Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings.
So, like, that maternal love, that
unconditional.
Well, actually, Marshall Linehan doesn't believe in unconditional love.
Love that.
Everyone has limits. Everyone has, like, the place where they just reach their limit. But point taken.
Yeah.
Is that boundless kind of love, that receiving of a human, even in their imperfections, that you still love them,
and all beings,
and you have this for all beings. That is definitely lofty goal.
It's a tall order.
Yeah,
it's a tall order. And the other thing I heard you talk about, you mentioned something about, like, compassion, right? And I've heard. And we've had this conversation a couple times.
Wait 1 second.
Waiting.
That was not my point. My point was the thing that you're saying about loving, like when you were talking about turning that on yourself. That sounded very beautiful to me.
Oh.
And I wanted you to elaborate on that. Like, that you had said, you know, like, well, if I can feel that way about all beings, then I can do that for me.
Yeah.
But there feels like there's something in there that's more than just, oh, I'm gonna mother my inner child. It feels like more than that.
And to me, like,
not to diminish mothering your inner child.
Yeah, no, totally. And for me, it's like, the word that really fits for me is unconditional, right? It's this, like, a mother protects with her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. And, like, that's all. That's not, like, just the people who are kind to us. That's not just the people who believe the same things that we do. Just the people who are in our city.
Or the people we think are good people.
Yeah, it's all.
Even the really bad people?
Yeah, but no one's worse than me, right? That's where my mind goes. And so,
Maddie, I know lots of people that are worse than you.
See, but this is the thing, like, and it goes back to our very first episode where we talked about Buddha nature. We talked about this inherent capacity to wake up that all beings have. And so when we extend this boundless loving kindness, like, all directions, all around, it helps me, number one, realize how small I am. And it's relieving. It's very relieving for me. And it also helps me just feel like, oh, yeah, like being, like caring is enough. Caring is enough. And I like that. It's been a helpful practice. So does that help expand what you were hoping?
Yeah. I think I really like the parts where Maddie talks about learning to love themselves.
I'm trying.
I think that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah,
that
well, it's
happens
been,
in the
I mean,
podcast.
that's why I started this practice. And if you listen to our mini bio episodes about our story, like you can hear about my whole journey through self-hatred and rehab and all these things. But the Dharma, these practices, that is what has saved me. Yeah. And saved not just like my life, but just like given me hope, which is so funny because in Buddhism we talk about like letting go of hope and like abandoning it.
Wait.
Another episode.
Are
It's
you
another
sure?
episode.
Now we're committing to season 2. Are you making us commit to season 2? Because how
We'll
can
see.
we abandon the conversation about not having hope being a good thing?
It's when we're talking about,
Don't listen to Maddie until we have a thorough exploration. I want you all out there to have a lot of hope. I want you to
Have
leave
a
with
lot
this
of hope.
episode with a lot of hope.
Okay.
I would just cut that chunk just to keep it like
Cut that chunk.
on the topic.
Cut the
and
hope
that-
chunk.
no hope.
No
No
hope.
chunky hope.
Will. Get
Will.
rid of hope.
Just get rid of the hope.
Get rid of all the hope, and maybe that was a good place to pick up with the self-compassion.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right, that's the one where we're missing.
Yeah.
That's why Stephanie is here.
Yep, exactly. Okay, hope is out, compassion is in. So we've had this conversation before as well, kind of bringing it back around to some of the things I've heard you say when you're talking in your story and when we're having these conversations. You're kind of saying, I almost hear you're using compassion and loving kindness interchangeably.
I have been, but you're teaching me.
So I am actually curious, do you see a difference in those things, like just naturally for yourself?
I think a little bit. Like loving kindness is more like the wooey, gooey, like filled with light kind of thing. While compassion feels like more boots on the ground, like getting it done to me.
So actionable.
Like I always define compassion as like as opposed to empathy. To me, empathy is when you're trying to feel someone's feelings, like as though like if I feel your feelings, then Maddie, you won't feel them as intensely, and I'll be carrying them for you, right? While compassion is more like I can be a witness and advocate, because I can't actually make you feel less feelings because I'm feeling your feelings.
Okay, I see. So there's so when we talk about compassion versus loving kindness, and so it's important here to talk about the Brahma Viharas.
Oh boy, here we go with the Poly-Sanskrit
Sanskrit word, Brahma Viharas.
Brahma Vihara.
Haras.
That will be on the website.
Yes. The divine abodes of the heart.
Oh, that's very poetic. The divine abodes of the heart. So the divine places that the heart lives
to reside. Yeah. Okay. And these are the heart practices.
Okay.
So the first one, metta, loving kindness, kind of what we're talking about today. The second one, karuna, or compassion. The third one, mudita, which is translated often as non-attached appreciation or sympathetic joy. And the last one, upekkha, which is equanimity. So we're going to stick just with these first two, because I want to talk a little bit
and we already had an episode about equanimity.
And mudita is one of my absolute favorite things. There's plenty of places on the internet where you can hear me talk about mudita. It's like one of my favorite practices. But loving kindness is this overarching metta, loving kindness thing. I find it helps me to think about compassion as loving kindness towards pain. So I think we're talking about the same thing here, because it sounds like what you're saying is compassion for you is action. It's bearing witness. It's being with pain of somebody else's. And we can also be with our own pain.
Right, self-compassion.
And this differs from loving kindness for me because I can hold metta even when pain is not present.
Right. Yeah, I think that's why loving kindness feels lighter.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's not in response to pain. It's just like sending out the good vibes.
Yeah, and we've heard in the Dharma karuna, or compassion, lightly translated to the quivering of the heart in response to pain.
Okay, the quivering of the heart so compassion, karuna, is the quivering of the heart in response to pain. See the poetry of this?
I love it.
I mean, just hold on to that for a moment. Like, for those of you who have good imaginations, right? That trembling heart, the tenderness of that, the quivering in response to pain, that feels so accurate.
Yeah. That's
as
why,
an experience.
That's why I love the Dharma, because it just gives vocabulary to things we've all already felt and know deeply. But self-compassion, for me, like if we're talking about the difference between loving kindness and compassion, self-compassion was really difficult for me to learn. And so I have a little story.
I love your stories.
I have a teeny tiny story here. And I realize when I talk about compassion, I realize I was so averse to compassion because I was worried I was pitying myself. Right? So keep that in mind. I'm coming in thinking pity and compassion are the same thing. Right? So as all of my stories start, I was on a retreat. I was on a meditation retreat.
I know, I was just thinking that. I was like, your stories are always on retreat.
Yeah.
I think Maddie's like the advertisement for going on
Go
retreat.
on retreat. Do it.
So many painful transformative things happen. Just don't camp. Oh, sorry. Referencing episode 9.
I love it. So I was on retreat and I had driven down and like a ride share with a couple other people who were going to the same retreat. I had not met them before. And we talked in the car and we were buddies. It was awesome. We get to the retreat and we're chit-chatting and then we go into silence. So I've made these new friends and now I can't talk to them at all. And so the thing that you'll learn if you do go on silent retreat is even though you can't talk to people, you still have some connections here and there. So like me and one of these friends, every night we wound up sitting on the porch at the same time, drinking tea in rocking chairs side by side, and it just became our practice. And so, we're walking into the Dharma Hall, which is a building outside of the actual, it's not connected to anything else. You have to walk to it. And so we're walking to the Dharma Hall, and I'm right behind my friend. And my friend takes their shoes off and puts them in the grass. And I start to take my shoes off. Because
everyone takes off their shoes when they're going into the meditation hall.
Meditation hall. So they take off their shoes, they go in the meditation hall, I take off my shoes. And as I'm taking off my shoes, I realize it's starting to rain. And so my brain goes, oh, I should move my friend's shoes so they don't get wet. Clearly, this is what I should do. And so I take my friend's shoes and my shoes and I move them to underneath an awning so that they're covered by the rain. And I walk in, and as I'm walking into the Dharma Hall, my brain goes, they're going to wonder who touched their shoes. They're going to come out and be like, who the hell touched my shoes? That's so gross. That's so weird. And so I'm standing in the Dharma Hall, and I'm like, I can either walk to my cushion or I can go back and I can move the shoes back into the rain. I know. And so I decide that I'm going to instead try to communicate to my friend that I moved their shoes so they aren't surprised.
So they don't think you're gross and weird.
Exactly. And so I go up, and they're at the very front of the Dharma Hall. This is before we start meditation, but I walk up to them and I mime to them, I do the rain falling hands, and I mouth I moved your shoes because it started raining, and I'm just mouthing it silently, and they give me this look what are you talking about? And so then I quietly say, it started raining, so I moved your shoes, and they bow and they go, thank you, and they say thank you. So I walk back to my cushion. I'm like, whew, crisis averted. And I sit down. And
but no.
Yeah, I sit down.
The crisis has only just begun.
And I sit down, and my mind is like, you just broke silence to tell somebody that you moved their shoes because you're selfish and because you're this and because you're that. And you just couldn't let, this happen or someone have their experience. And you're just trying to make yourself seem better. And so my mind starts rolling with all of these thoughts. And I'm I start crying. I'm like, why does my mind do this to me? Like, why am I such a piece of shit? Right? And it just so happened that same day we had sign-ups for interviews with the teachers. And so that moment I got up, I walked into the lobby, and I signed up for a spot for an interview.
That was a good act of self-care.
Well, it's funny because I had tried not to, because I'm such a selfish POS, right? So I didn't want to take that from somebody else.
You didn't want to take one of those spots.
Yeah, so I took the spot, and I got in with the teacher, and I told him about this, and he said, you know, when that happens, sometimes it's just best to say, hey, mind, it really crushes me when you do that. It really crushes me when you do that. And not in an effort to try and fix it, to try and change it, but just to be like, oh, sweet bunny mind, it really bums me out when you do that. And this is compassion. This is self-compassion. Not trying to fix the pain, but instead, like just like you said, bearing witness, being with that quivering of the heart, and holding that compassion for myself gives me the capacity to hold that compassion for others.
I love also that, because this actually kind of comes back to what we talked about in episode 9, is that kindness is actually limit setting with your own mind. You're setting a boundary. You're like, hey, that's not kind.
Well, so it's interesting. I almost would disagree. I think it's less like trying to be like, that's not kind, and like, we don't do that or something like that. To me, it's more like, oh, sweet mind, I see you. And that's when we do compassion phrases, it's I see you, I feel you, I know you, I love you.
Oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
What is this?
So it's the same, like with metta, with loving kindness, you have, you know, maybe filled with loving kindness, all those kinds of phrases. Each one of these Brahma Viharas is a practice that is rooted in phrases. So you can do compassion practice where you have a painful thing, and towards the pain, say, I see you, I feel you, I know you, I love you.
So, okay. I have never heard of this practice before, and I think it sounds very powerful. So you're saying that, like, when you are encountering your own pain,
or pain of any kind,
pain of any kind, okay, any pain, I see you, like that's the witness. I witness you. I feel you. I feel you. Okay, so I like that's expressing understanding. I know you. Okay, I recognize you. I love you. That's that sending. That's the
love bit, the metta.
Yeah.
And the reason we do this is because really what we have, sometimes all that pain wants is to be seen.
I think that's true. You know, I always say, like in DBT, I talk about invalidation is like throwing lighter fluid on intense emotions. Like invalidating the emotion, boom, blows up. Validation is the balm. Validation is like feeling seen, heard, understood. Just literally what you're talking about.
And it's important to understand that I can't control what my mind does.
Yes, you can.
No. And so my mind does this to me.
Sorry, I was just kidding.
No, I love it.
Intrusive thoughts, brains, popcorn of thoughts.
Yeah, a thought is a thought.
So I read somewhere it's like 6,000 thoughts a day, and then another place I read 60,000.
It's a lot. It's a lot of thoughts,
and you can't control them.
Same, ditto. And if I were to be like, mind, no, we don't do that, it would just get more angry, more loud, because all it really wants is to be like, just see me, just see this, just feel this, just know this, just be here with me and love me with it. And that moment at that retreat was the first time I think I ever experienced self-compassion. And I was like 25, 26.
Wow.
Right? And so I went my whole life never experiencing self-compassion because whatever I brought up, like whatever I grew up in, I don't want to like dog the church, but like my upbringing made me feel very bad to be compassionate with myself. It made me feel like it was pity.
Okay.
Right? And so
And pity, like, what's pity implies, like,
rolling around in it.
okay.
Right? So, like, I always say that pity is when I'm having pain, it's just wrapping myself in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, what I was doing when I sat down on the cushion, you're such a piece of shit. You only do kind things because
That sounds
of how
more
it
like
looks to you.
bullying than pity.
But even then, like, when you go into it, you're rolling around in the pain.
Yeah.
You're like a dog in mud. Like, you're just covering yourself
Or
in
something
pain.
else.
Or
The
something
dog's
else.
rolling.
So yeah, so that's what I mean when I'm talking about the difference between metta and karuna, or loving kindness versus compassion.
Mm-hmm.
They are deeply connected, but they are different qualities.
Mm-hmm.
They are different qualities, but they are connected, which is beautiful.
I think it's so helpful to understand all of that. Like, it's that understanding different ways of considering compassion, different ways of considering kindness, so that we kind of understand the flavors of human experience. Mm-hmm. And then we get better and better at recognizing them. That's, to me, in DBT, mindfulness is really about being mindful of things like this, like what is the nature of the compassion, what's the nature of the loving kindness, what's the, like, recognizing that, oh, right now in this moment, what's helpful is to see, understand, recognize, send love to this pain. That's mindfulness to me. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It's that ability to be, like, again and again stepping out, viewing your experience. And the more that we have language for our experience, the easier it becomes to step out and be like, this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. And this is what I need in this moment. Mm-hmm. To be skillful, to reduce my suffering, and to step into a kinder, gentler place.